It. Right, joining me now, Portia Berry-Kilby. She's a political commentator with Young Voices UK. She's joining me now. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Portia. Let's start with regards to where we are on the front page of the Telegraph. I showed it earlier. Let me just grab it here. You've probably seen this inflation stealth tax of 30 billion looming. And this is because, obviously, we're seeing inflation going up, people being dragged into that higher tax bracket because they are being given some sort of pay rise. But essentially, Rishi Sunak has caused this by saying he's going to freeze the tax bands, and he's going to continue freezing them until 2026. Do you think that is a problem for him in this campaign?
I think that it's a huge problem, and there's probably very little doubt that it's a problem. I think it points to the flaw in making policy which is in place for 3 or so years, and especially when you can't predict what the economy is going to do, as is evident now. Like, they knew inflation was going to happen, it's much higher, and they're sticking by this policy, at least at present, which means the government is raising far more money than they anticipated from it, and people are a lot poorer off, whilst also facing huge cost of living crisis with energy bills and other inflation as well. It's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the reason I love having younger people on these shows, because I think, you know, you are obviously the future. Just in terms of where you are and what you're hearing from these two candidates, what's your overall view? Because obviously it will be different probably to mine, to many people of my age, but you obviously may have a differing opinion, given that obviously you're looking at a longer-term forecast than I am.
Well, I don't think you're that old, David.
That's very sweet. I wasn't actually fishing for that, but thank you.
I think Conservatives, my generation, want a Conservative Prime Minister, and at the moment that does seem to be Liz. She has at least promised to be a bit more conservative in her fiscal policies, and that is concerning insofar as what will the direct support look like for those who need it, but it does seem a bit more fiscally responsible than giving out huge amounts of money to people somewhat willy-nilly, as we have seen with certain policies of like £400 per household, which isn't targeted. It doesn't help those who need it. As a Conservative Party member, I want a Prime Minister who is conservative fiscally.
But surely Rishi Sunak would say to you, well, the problem is that Liz Truss is basically saying that she will drop tax, so that therefore reduce national insurance, the rise in national insurance will reduce that corporation tax rise. Now, clearly that means that we will have to borrow some more money. Now, already we've borrowed a lot of money, £400 billion to pay for that COVID debt. Now, Rishi Sunak has said that this is just the wrong policy. Dominic Raab's gone further than that. He said this is deeply irresponsible.
But then you also have other MPs saying that Rishi Sunak is flip-flopping, that he is also being irresponsible in his policies. And either way, there's going to be some borrowing somewhere, or there's whatever money they do raise to give back to people is going to come from taxes or from borrowing. And at the end of the day, when you've got energy bills of like over $4,000 projected, there's only so much, like a few tax cuts here and there, like can do, but there's also only so much a few handouts can do.
Well, you make a great point. I mean, I've said this all along, that if you're talking about £4,000 or thereabout, over that, 4,200 I think is the latest estimate. By the way, that's not the last one. We think it's going to go up again. Now, how on earth can people who are already struggling pay £350, £400 a month for their energy bills, on top of everything else, on top of food prices, on top of everything that they've got to buy, and look after their children? And Rishi Sunak says, right, here's 400 quid.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly hitting the mark either. So given that that's not hitting the mark, I'd rather have a bit more of a lower C conservative approach to the problem. And also, I think people need to move away from the idea that it's the government's responsibility to solve every single problem. And granted, you can say that they've got us into the mess, but people also have to think through, hang on a minute, maybe it makes sense to move back in with parents, to have your grandparent in your own home so that they're not faced as a pensioner with huge, like £4,000 bills. There has to be some responsibility on people, and I think that honestly is the more conservative approach.
It's an interesting one, that, and particularly when you look at European families, often multi-generational living does happen. You know, grandparents live a alongside younger people as well. I think it's rather lovely, actually, for lots of reasons, that the grandparents get involved with the children and so on. And certainly my family, my mum's living with me at the moment, which is great. Not that I see her, because I'm always here. But I think that is great. I mean, the problem is that this is out of necessity, though, rather than out of choice. Because if you can't... And I am deeply worried about elderly people. You know, they are often the most vulnerable. They're often isolated. They don't have the friends and the friendship groups that you may well have. And I'm just deeply nervous that we're abandoning elderly people.
For sure. And I think there has to be some form of targeted help for elderly people. But I'm hoping this is the kick up the backside people need who have that family. There is obviously in many cases breakdown of family, but it shouldn't just be immediate family members, nieces, nephews, neighbours. And I think people did come together somewhat during COVID, but in many ways it was at arm's reach because of various restrictions. Maybe this is going to push people in a very organic way to take better care of their loved ones and actually have to make some sacrifices for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just very difficult for people to juggle everything. You know, if you're looking after children, you're trying to work, then you have to look after your parents. And it is the squeeze middle, actually. It's people of my age who are really, really feeling that pinch. Just in terms of what's going on, the fact is we've actually seen another name coming out. This is another name today, Chris Skidmore, who's come out. He's changed sides. So he was on Rishi Sunak's side. He's gone to Liz Truss's side. Now, he's not alone, actually. There are 8 more Tory MPs: Damian Collins, Gordon Henderson, Henry Smith, James Davis, Mark Fletcher, Nigel Mills, Stephen McPartland, Mary Robinson. So it does seem that Liz Truss now has a commanding lead. According to the poll, she's on 88%. Let me just ask you, if that is right... And I've used this term a lot, which is I feel that this contest is very self-indulgent on behalf of the Conservative Party. This is a sentiment that's been echoed by many of our viewers. Do you think this should be cut short?
I think there's a very compelling case for it. And obviously there's going to be at least one ego bruised if Rishi steps back. But there seems to be a clear winner, and that should definitely filter into the two candidates' minds.
So I assume you're a member, right?
I am.
Yes. Yeah. So have you voted?
Not yet. My ballot's not come through.
So therefore it is all to play for then, no?
I think my mind was made up fairly early, and the amount of weeks-long campaign to get the undecided middle of 150,000 voters, that's a lot of time. And at the same time, people want policy decisions enacted. Though, I think to counter that, you could argue if you're going to have huge energy bills, you're not going to have heating bills in this weather. There's, waiting till September isn't the worst thing in the world. And there is a wee bit of sensationalism around that.
But there again, it won't be September, will it? By the time that this person then assembles their cabinet, then actually gets some policies and then actually does something, it's going to be far later than September. It'll be October, by which time we'll see the energy price cap going up, people really worrying. And I've already heard from people saying they're going to live in one room.
Yeah. And it is sad when people have that fear. And they are waiting. I don't think we need an answer today or tomorrow, but yes, I think people are splitting ends over a leadership election when the winner is more or less determined. OK, well,
it remains to be seen, certainly, in terms of that. Just in terms of where we are, though, what could Rishi Sunak do to convince you to change your vote?
I honestly don't know if Rishi Sunak could convince me. I think it would be more a matter of Liz having to do something terrible, or her flip-flopping as much as Rishi has, and them basically converging on the same policy.
And one other point, then, I'd like to make to you. So Boris Johnson obviously came... Many people voted for Boris because they liked him. He had a personal vote. There is no doubt about that. I've seen it myself, particularly in the Red Wall. Boris had an 80-seat majority. He got stabbed, or essentially by his own party, who got rid of him. Many people in the Conservative Party aren't very happy about that. We've seen 15,000 signing that petition by Lord Cruddas. Do you think this new person will have a mandate to govern?
I think they do. I think they do need to make a compelling case to a lot of people, but people also understand that they vote for their MP. And of course, that is swayed by who is the leader of the party. But there is a mandate to govern, and the next election is only a couple of years away anyway. So you might as well take advantage of those 2 years, deliver on what the mandate was and the manifesto was in the first place, and hopefully hit the ground running come the next election.
Well, as they say, a week is a long time in politics, let alone 2 years. Do you think, let me ask you a very difficult question, do you think if there was a general election today, would the Conservatives win?
Oof, I think it would be a big fight.
You should be a politician. Do you think they'd win? Do you think they would win?
I think they could win. I think they could win. I
You
think
really should be a
a very good
politician.
campaign.
You really? Are you going to be a politician?
Oh, who knows? I think that doesn't really do anyone any favours.
You really should be a politician. You haven't given me an answer to any of those questions. Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you, Portia. That's Portia Berry-Kilby, who is a political commentator with an organisation called Young Voices UK, and I think they're a great organisation. I'm a big fan of getting young people involved in politics.